For the literary piece for the 1960s and 70s, I chose a novel by Philip Roth titled American Pastoral. Roth's book ended up winning the Pulitzer Prize in 1998. He didn't write it until the mid-1990s. So he's looking back at this era of the 1960s and 70s and trying to capture, like any great literary type, the zeitgeist, the feeling of the age. He does so in a way, I think, that aligns nicely with Maclay's history. The chapter on the 1970s in Maclay's history in 1980s was titled Fall and Restoration. Well, American Pastoral is broken up into three parts. The first part is what is called Paradise Remembered. The second part is called The Fall. And then the third part, the part we're going to read from, is Paradise Lost. So here we have Roth, like Maclay, recognizing that there's a pattern to history and there seems to be something very wrong in the 1970s. But whereas Maclay takes a look at this by examining three different presidencies, what Roth does is he examines this by taking a look at one individual fictional account, and that is the person of Swede Levov. Swede, and you know this type of person, was the individual who everyone loved in high school. He's the captain of the football team, elected class president. Thereafter, he goes on and joins the Marines. After the Marines, he takes over his family business and does well by himself and does well by others. He's the American success story. What happens to Swede Levov, however, in the 1960s? What happens to the Swede Levovs in Vietnam? And here Roth tells us something. Even they are carried away by history. Even they are history's plaything. Not even the best among us can overcome the direction that history is moving us in. So where do we see this play a part in Swede's life? Swede had a daughter who had grown disgruntled, so disgruntled about the war that she had blown up a post office. So Swede is left, along with his wife and 3 or 4 other couples, at a cocktail party. And we can imagine this cocktail party taking place in the late 1960s, early 1970s. And what do we learn when we hear this conversation take place among regular Americans? Well, we learn something very important from Roth, that they were incapable, in general, of exercising their moral and intellectual faculties, and that Swede in particular had a difficult time expressing why he thought about the world as he did. And here I want to direct your attention to Roth's description of Swede Levov in this instance. Swede could not complete his thoughts. He sat at dinner eternally inert, immobilized, ineffectual, estranged from those expansive blessings of openness and vigor conferred on him by his hyper-optimism. This great American story, this hyper-optimistic human being, cannot confront the realities of the late 1960s, early 1970s. Who instead leads the charge in this conversation? Well, it's not Swede, but it's a lady named Marsha Umanov, a Columbia professor. And what she does with the conversation is she celebrates the change that is apace in American society. All the revolutions, whether it's the sexual revolution or the gender revolution, all these revolutions serve a good purpose. Doing away with an older standard, an older social construct, and a moving toward a new permissiveness, a new liberty, a new openness in the world. Well, Umanov says that everything should be allowed. And even when she's trying to make this case, there are others in the room that disagree with her, but at the end of the day, she wins the argument. Why? Because she's able to make a serious case that's undefended by others, that the Bible, right, is an old set of concepts, includes an old set of ethics that don't apply to the world today. A new world, a brave new world, calls upon a brave new way of looking at that world. The most that those who disagree with Marsha can do is recognize that she has eaten from the tree of knowledge and she has transgressed, but there's nothing that one can do about that transgression if people like Marsha live within the gates of American society. So a really hard look at American life, one that doesn't bode well for recovery long term if the seeds of this doubt will continue to plague America throughout our time.